Here we have a beautiful half a pomegranate. I mean, I say beautiful, but it's sort of ugly beautiful, this one, because it's not quite ripe, but the patterning inside is almost like writing script, isn't it? Something sort of looks like a magical letter. And it's slightly yellow here, which is not usually like that. It's a little bit grey white or bluey white normally from memory. But this is going to be fantastic to paint. And I can see already I'm thinking of the colours I'm going to need. I'm going to need yellow ochre, a little bit of grey, alizarin crimson, a little bit of yellow ochre, perhaps a little bit of violet in the seeds, some umbers up here and greys, and some browns here as well, umbers. A little bit of sienna in there, and in here it's like almost like a bluey grey. So yeah, this is going to be fun to paint. So hope you can paint with me. So for this, you're going to obviously need your paints and some quite robust paper. I would work probably on, if you're more experienced, I'd work on a smooth paper. If you're less experienced, I'd work on a cold press paper. So you've got a bit of texture. You need a B or an HB pencil, a size 8 brush round topped, and a little detailed brush like a size, this is a size 4, but it's a major brush, but actually made by Major. But I think this is more like a size 3, really. The sizing on brushes is quite strange sometimes, depending on the product, the company that you bought. It's also worth noting that you can actually paint with pomegranate juice. However, this one isn't going to yield much juice because it's a little bit unripe. But you can actually use pomegranate juice to paint with. It's rather fantastic. And what can you paint with pomegranate juice? Pomegranate and other things. It's actually quite nice for some flesh tones as well. So I'm going to concentrate on the inside because the outside is not quite as exciting to paint. And I'm going to do a very gentle drawing first, and I'm going to mix up my colours too. I think I'll mix my colours first so it's easier to have them ready, and then I'll do my drawing. So this is my palette of the week, really. It's great in one way. It's got actually a design fault, which is that when you close the lid, it closes it too close to the paints, and it gets some of the paint pans come out and stick on the lid. But the colours themselves are really nice. So it's made by Dale Rowney. So I actually use it as much as I can, but when I close the lid, I don't close it fully. The colours I'm going to use are alizarin crimson, which is a really beautiful colour. I'm going to use a bit of red, cadmium red, there. Actually, this one here is a Windsor red, but it'll do. And you can see it's very strong pigment because what it's doing is it's seeping into the tin. Don't know how it's managing that because tin is not porous, but anyway. So there's some red, and the other colours we're going to need are a nice warm yellow, which is a cadmium yellow or a Naples yellow. And then I'm going to need to mix myself some grey. You could use a Payne's grey, or could use it could even use a tiny bit of indigo and grey together. Try and avoid black if you can. And then you're going to use, I'm going to put my umbers in here. So there's a well, that's a sienna, actually, that one. And then we've got a burnt umber there. And then I'm going to go for a raw umber beside it. So we're going to need quite a few browns. And then, of course, we're going to need, now this has been contaminated a bit, this yellow ochre. Had a bit of blue in it for some reason. And I think that's because when the lid closed, it caught it from the ultramarine next door here. So let's get some yellow ochre on there. Okay, so I'm sort of ready as I'll ever be. And I'm going to have one last look at the pomegranate so I really get a sense of what. So I've got quite a lot of light in here, which means that I've got to preserve that in the painting. So let's get on with the drawing. Now we've got our paints mixed. I'm using a B pencil, which I prefer to the HB, just a little bit softer. And I'm just going to get myself a general shape. And notice that a pomegranate is slightly misshapen. It's not a perfect sort of oval that some people do, or spherical shape. It's got sort of some strange little misshapen bits in. And then I'm going to map out some of the areas that I'm going to need to paint. I'll make that a bit bigger there. And then I'm going to map out some of those little nuances in here. That's going to be where the grey and the umber is. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of drawing each seed individually, which would take forever right now, I'm just going to do a general shape of how these seeds sit in here. How do they, like a sort of map really, of how all of these go together? Because it's very hard to get something like this right straight away. So it's a good idea to do a general map of how all of the seeds are positioned. And that one goes like that, actually, like that. They look like little sea creatures or something. And then we got this in here, squashed up against that one. And that goes in there like that. And then we've got two lovely seeds here. And then there's quite a lot of space in between. I think I'm going to make this a bit bigger, actually. That one a bit bigger, a bit more substantial. Yeah, that'll do. And then that's got a slight kick in it there. It's a bit like two pairs of trousers at the bottom here. And that comes up a little bit higher up there and meets that more like that. Okay, so rub out what you don't need, because obviously there's some little errors in there or little bits that you don't want. Rub all of those extra lines out so that you can see the proper map of everything. And then when you're ready, what you need to do is actually rub out the drawing a little bit more. Why? Because I don't want the pencil line particularly emphasized in my painting. I'm just going to rub it back a little bit like that. Some people like the pencil lines coming through, and sometimes it's quite nice, it's quite appropriate. Often in botanical drawings, paintings, there may be some incredible little details that are virtually impossible to do with a paintbrush. So you might need at that point to use pencil line. And you can embellish this later on, of course. Now, I've now got all of the seeds to think about. So how do I do that? I can either count them and be indebted absolutely to every single seed in there, or I can do an approximate, which is what I am going to do. So I'm going to try and find, they're all different shapes. They're almost like teeth. So I'm just going to do them as best I can. There's a like faded one where a baby seed is growing there. So they're just more of outlines. And they're sort of all squashed together. They're rather beautiful, actually, when you look closely at them. Really rather beautiful. So here's this trouser legs coming up that side, and then coming down there. Now, don't get daunted by all these seeds, because life's too short to be really worried about being absolutely pedantically indebted to every single piece, but you want to get a general feel for it. Okay, so those are the trouser bits. Here, these are the seeds that I think are really lovely. Just here, they're sort of like umbilically connected there. And then there's two sort of chunkier ones there. And then we go up here and they're a bit mashed up. A little bit mashed up there, floating in a bit of flesh. There. And as you go, you might make changes to your drawing anyway, because you might realize that one of the seeds needs to go somewhere where you haven't drawn a line. So you might have to amend things as you go, and that's all right. That's fine to do that. So I'll speed this up and get to the end. So I'm going to paint yellow, just a very faint trace of yellow all over the pomegranate. Now I did slightly dampen the page first, the pomegranate drawing first, but not much. I don't want it to be a truly wet on wet painting because I want to have some control over it. So I'm just using a bit of yellow all over, including the little rim of skin around the edge, all over with my size 8 brush, like that. I slightly dampened the pomegranate drawing with a clean wet brush, and then I went in with a mixture of yellow and a tiny, tiny bit of, guess what, pomegranate juice, but you could use alizarin crimson. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go for some more yellow, but yellow ochre, which is more of a caramel color, that one there. I'm going to go for that on the skin of the pomegranate because with watercolor painting, you need to go from light to dark. So I'm going to put in some touches of yellow ochre around where it starts to brown once it's cut open. So little bits of yellow ochre around there. And then when it dries, I can see where I'm going to need some more yellow as well. I'm going to put a little bit in there, like that. All very gentle, all using the size 8 brush. I'm not going for any detail yet. The detail comes always at the end of a painting. Don't get bogged down in the detail too early on. Okay, so I'm beginning to get the skin. If you find you want to reinstate a few lighter parts and you've slightly gone over them, you can just get a clean damp brush or a clean bit of cotton wool or tissue that's dunked in water, squeezed out so it's not dripping wet, and then just lift off some extra bits if you feel you need them. I'm now going to go in for, I'm going to go straight in with some like pale greys. Now, where I'm going to do that is where there are bits like where the, it's almost like where teeth come out, or no, teeth have bitten into an apple. You can see those sort of denture marks there, and some of the greys around here. So I'm going to go for some greys. Some people might not do greys now, but I'm going to. But I'm going to make another grey with, I'm going to use ultramarine blue. Let's get some ultramarine blue. And let's mix it with some burnt sienna. And that gives you nice warm grey. So I'm going to use a very diluted version of that, very, very diluted. And I'm going to go in for some of the parts where I feel like there is some grey. So I'll hold it here. So let's just make sure that's nice. I'm going to go for some greys around here. And there. I'm going to go for some greys in here. Just to outline some of those little bits where there were seeds, or maybe seeds are going to come. And then I'm going to add in some greys between some of these seeds as well. Now, grey is obviously lighter when it's diluted than some of the other colours we're going to use. But if it wasn't diluted, it would be darker and you put it at the end. So if you're doing a very light grey, you're okay to put it in now. But if it was too dark, then you wouldn't really want to. So you can use a clean damp brush. And off a bit like that. And allow it to bloom a little bit around the seeds. That's quite nice. Don't worry where it does that. Don't worry about that at all. It's quite nice to have that because it sort of feels a bit more of an organic thing rather than Oh, I can see some sort of grey in here. And there's some grey in there. There's a lot of grey. When you start looking at these, there's actually quite a lot of grey, which you don't notice at first. You could equally use sort of like a violet mixed with grey. I'm allowing these to bloom a little bit. I'm just going around where, and I'm going to put some grey up here as well in the stalky bit. So I may as well, I'm a great believer in using up paint as you've got it. Use it up. If you've got some on your brush and you can use it up, you've got some on your palette and you can use it up rather than mixing a fresh lot. Because I can put the grey as a sort of undercoat in here. Use that there. Where else am I going to go? Oh, I'm going to go around here as well. Sort of moving around really. The more you look, the more you notice, always. And I'm noticing more and more grey as I go around. So I'm actually quite enjoying putting these bits in. And letting it bloom, which we're going to do with the other colours as well. Okay, I'll come back to you when I've finished the greys. So I've done the greys, and now, and it doesn't look like pomegranate at all at the moment still, but it will do. Trust me, it will do. We are now onto the pinks, the pinky colours that we can see, and obviously there's quite a lot of it, but there's also red, but we're going to go for pink first. Arguably, yes, pink is darker than red, but I'm just going to go for the pinks. Now you can be quite generous with these, and you can let these bleed quite a lot, because it doesn't matter if these bleed. And I'm using a little bit of pomegranate juice with this, and I'm going round the seeds like that. And this is where your pomegranate starts to come to life a little bit, because when it starts to bloom, which is where it feathers out a bit, it starts to have a lovely quality to it, because in the pomegranate it sort of does that naturally anyway. So once you get these seeds enclosed with this pinkiness, and you can go over the grey with it, and it will just make those bits a bit darker, and you'll get a bit more depth. So I'm now going round the seeds. I want to leave enough seed to add some slight bit of red on around some of them, but also I want to have enough light in the seed so I can add a tiny hint of yellow or a tiny hint of grey, whatever they need, or even orange, some of them. So this is where I'm starting to go around the seeds. Go around each one with this pink, and I'll come back to you. Notice some of them don't have pink all the way around. These ones here have only got pink sort of mainly at the top, and the bottom part is more sort of like a faded yellow. So watch out where you don't need to go around all of them, but some of them are more embedded in, the little ones, and they've got the pink jelly flesh all around. So now some of them have got a really sort of vibrant red there. So I'm going to mix cadmium orange and red together and try and get some of these brighter colours in here. So particularly in these ones here, really quite strong. Strong feel to them around here, like that. And then some in here. Wherever you can see that brightness, put that in. And once you start looking, you can see it's sort of, I'm going to put it in these ones here as well, those really bright orange, because it's really iridescent, that those middle pomegranates, and I can put some pink over that. So wherever you think you can see that intensity, We're going to do another layer of pink anyway. We've just got a very soft layer to begin with. And when that dries, I'm going to put some pink back into it. It's just to give it a vibrant undertone. And you can see the pomegranate's changing already. I'm getting a lot more pink in there because it's bleeding out. I'm going to put some pink around the edge. So I'm going to go around the edge here. Get some of this edging in. And already that's beginning to bleed. In the real life, it's beginning to bleed into the pomegranate skin, yellow skin. So you can let this bleed a little bit as well. I'm just using my size 4 brush for this. I meant to say for all the detail, use your size 4 brush. Now, if you are worried about smudging, you can always turn your paper round. People tend to forget that, but you can. And anything where it feels like you've got a mistake, which in some ways you could argue that is going a bit too bloomed, I'm going to make a feature of that and use it. So don't panic. Never panic in watercolour, because sometimes mistakes can be used to your advantage. I've noticed that the pink goes up the side here and up the side there as well. So what I'm going to do is to give it a slightly smudgy feel of the skin coming into the yellow, I'm going to use a clean damp number 4 brush, one I was just using, and I'm going to slightly smudge the edges of the paint that I've just put down. I don't know if you can see that, but it starts to bleed it into the rest of the skin, which is what we want. So I'm just lifting it, or moving it rather. And I can exaggerate that later, but I just want to have a bit of, sometimes when you're painting, you just want a little bit of fun to keep you going, because otherwise it can get a bit tedious. So you might digress. Nothing wrong with a bit of digression, ever really, especially in art. It just gives you a tiny little bit of a smudge around the edge. Just a bit. And then we can always go back anyway to that later. So I want to go back with some pink into these ones because they were very strong, those. I'm going to go back into those. And then I'm going to let those dry a bit, and then I'll come back to you in a minute. So you can see those have now got a really sort of iridescent feel, those. I'm going to go back in now and start to shift some of the colour using a clean damp brush, a size 4. And I'm going to use what exists already and move it down over the pips, the seeds, because I don't want to over egg it. I just want a gentle sheen of that pink. And what better way than just to use what's already there? I don't know if you can see that. It just shifts it a little bit. So it's a little bit more subtle. And even if it's dry, it doesn't matter. You can still shift the paint. Now, that's a good reason why we have good paper, because the thicker and stronger the paper, the more you can fiddle around with it after things have dried. If this paper was cheap, it would not stand the fiddling around with. It would probably damage the surface of the paper too much. But with thicker, stronger paper, heavier paper rather, like a 300 weight cold press, then you can really sort of move paint around even after it's dry, because the paper surface is not going to get damaged so easily. So I'm just doing that over all of them. I'm giving them sort of like a little It's almost like brushing it. It's like being a dentist with this, because it's like cleaning teeth, because these seeds are like little teeth. That's just probably the way my mind thinks, but you know. I'm just doing it across all of them. And some of them I've noticed have got a sort of a little tiny extra bit of yellow. So I'm going to put that in as well on some of them. So I'm just moving around, shifting some of that pink across the teeth, little seeds. And then I've noticed that in some areas, there are some little bits of yellow that need to be reinstated. And those are up here. Put some yellow back in here. Just little bits of yellow on these, not too much. Just a little bit. Not all of them, but some of them have got that slightly yellow feel, like that one has there. That one has there. That one has there. That one has there. Just see a few of them here and there will have a slightly yellow sheen, and others won't. Right, when you've done that, you then need to go in with the other sheen, which is yellow ochre, yellow and grey. So the yellow ochre, yellow and grey, you've got it on your palette already. And if you haven't, you can just add some more in. We're trying to make a sort of dirty, grey, yellowy sheen. So it's yellow ochre, yellow and grey. And we're going to do it very diluted, and that will be our sheen across some of those pomegranate teeth or seeds. So I can see them here. Yeah. And this is your chance now. You're putting in something a bit darker to leave some lighter areas. So it almost looks like you've got white. Can you see that? It's almost like you've got white now because you're putting in this darker bit. So it gives you those highlights you might be craving. So it's quite useful. So in relatively, it looks like you've got white areas now. It's a little trick. So just go around trying to find those grey, yellowy, nicotine stained teeth. And you can use that colour as well for those sort of ones that haven't sort of grown out yet or grown yet here. So it's quite a useful colour to have for these ones, which were neither here nor there. They're not really grown yet. And what it does as well is it starts to give more three-dimension. I'm having to stretch to reach my palette because I've got such limited space here. Okay, so I'm just going around sorting out where I can put that grey yellow sheen. Now your paper should be pretty dry by now, really. You can also use it a bit up here, why not? On the stalk. As I say, use up colour when you can. And there's now quite a lot of discoloration, which is actually handy, but it's the very same colour as this. So I can use this for the discoloration now, which is very handy. That's what I love about watercolour, is it's constantly changing. And so if you're doing fruit, so is the fruit that you're painting, and that's quite exciting, I think. That's why working from a photo is never as good. Oh, I've got some more down here that I can use. Oh, yes. It's all discolouring. If you can imagine people like Cézanne and Van Gogh and all the Impressionists, well, and of course the painters before them and the painters before them, they were painting by window light, the light from the window, and then that light went and they were painting by candlelight. And of course, I suppose, just like us, the things they were painting were probably going off quite rapidly. So they were having to deal with all sorts of dilemmas. Yeah, so that's changing. Right. I'm now beginning to see a little bit more grey as well. A little bit more grey in here. Now, I need some pink between those two very poignant or so I'm going to actually shift some of the pink from the edges of those out and use that there, like that. Waste not, want not. There. So it's beginning to come together very slowly. Got a lot to do yet. The quickest way of sorting this out would be to use colouring pencils, but I'm going to keep going because I'm really enjoying piecing it all together. Got a long way to go yet. I'm going to go for some extra pink now, which embeds those seeds more. So I'm going to go for that jelly pink colour mixed in with some pomegranate juice, um, which I have to be truthful, has come from another pomegranate that's in the fridge. Not this one, because this one is not yielding anything much. So I'm using the one from the other day, which is much riper than this. So I'm mixing my colour up. I'm using alizarin crimson, but I'm using a touch of cadmium red, or if you've got Windsor red as well. So it's got a touch of zing, a little touch of zing. And then I'm using my number 4 brush still. And now my paper's dry, I can go back in and add some extra jelly sort of flesh around there. I don't want it too wet. I'm going to go in and there's a little bit more in here I want to put in so that they feel like they're more embedded in. Can you see that? Just otherwise they look a bit, well, they were quite dry, but they're not as dry as that. Just embed them in, so give them a little sort of edging. And don't forget the ones that haven't got the pink all the way down. Don't put the pink all the way down unless it's changed. And bit by bit, the pomegranate will come to life. And it's all about looking, not cheating. Look at what you're painting. Is that bit really there? Do you need to put that bit down, or are you just putting it in for the sake of it? Try and think, keep looking at your pomegranate, and mine's changing all the time. So keep looking at it. Really, really looking. And try not to put anything in there that's not there because there's really not much point. because it won't look right anyway. Yeah, I can go much darker in there now. I'm actually going to go for a bit of violet in there. And where it's very, very dark, I'm going to go for a bit of violet. Now, I haven't got violet on this pan, this kit I've got, so I'm mixing in some ultramarine blue, which gives a very greyish violet. I'm going in quite dark in here, just in some of those bits. And don't forget, watercolour dries lighter. So it'll be all right, even if you think, oh, that's too dark. It will dry lighter. And we can always use a clean, damp brush to lift off if we need to. But we just need that added bit of depth with the violet. And some definitely around here. That's and a little bit on this one here. But that's quite nice. It's given it a lot more depth, and it's worth being a bit bold sometimes, and just even if you're a bit like scared of doing it, it's quite worth taking it to the next level, because it pushes you and it pushes the painting. And I'm beginning to notice, oh my gosh, I'm beginning to notice a bit of blue now as well. That's exciting. I'm beginning to notice blue, which is down here on these teeth or these seeds. Yeah, God, there's so much to see once you start looking. So much to see, and there's a little bit of discoloration there, which works quite well for that, and that too. So bit by bit, oh, I can use some purple in here, I think. But yep, it was quite exciting when you find a new place to put a colour that's on your brush. It's sort of like the make, do, and mend version of watercolour painting. Probably comes from my mum. She was a great ecologist before her time, really. Saving paper bags, plastic bags, recycling paint, you name it, she was doing it then in the 70s. So, okay, so I'm just adding some extra touches. I can even use some of it in my outer skin here. Sometimes when your paintbrush dries, it's quite useful because you can use much lighter strokes, but also you get different textures when your brush is drying. I think it's quite exciting when this changes, because I now can use a bit of purple here as well on this discoloration. Yeah, starting to come together. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Right. Now what's happened is, which is very common with watercolour, is that we've got a lot of like blooming and spreading out and all sorts of things, and we want a bit of sharpness. Now that would come at the end, because there is a point at which I will stop painting because it's just going to be adding too much onto it, and I might go in with some colouring pencils. Pure watercolorists would probably turn in their grave if they're not alive, or shriek, or have a sharp intake of breath. But for me, and especially a lot of watercolorists these days, it's a much more modern approach to use a combination of media. once your watercolour's dried. What's the point in struggling away with a tiny, tiny little brush that's not really adding much, when you can go in with a complementary colouring pencil that gives you that sharpness, that gives you more definition much quicker. Right, so yes, I'm going to add in some umbers now, very carefully. And I've started to get some over here and in here, because as I'm painting, it's gone over that seed as well. That seed's gone a bit more burnt umbery. And then I've got some in here. And then, of course, I've got some in the stalk, which I'm going to use now. There, like that. I'm not going to do too much brown because it can just be a bit depressing in terms of, you want to keep some white in there. Right, so now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use, I'm going to use cerulean blue, which is sky blue. Very, very, very pale dilution of sky blue. Why? Because it feels like there is a little bit of blue on some of these areas. Maybe you can't see it, but I can. I'm going to use a little bit, not as strong as that. Just a little bit here and there. I'm going to use my finger to, just some of these feel a bit blue. And Van Gogh was very into the idea of putting down colours that he felt should be there, rather than what was supposed to be there by, you know, people that were saying, oh, that can't be right. Well, it's up to you. In the end, it's up to you. But I think you should push the boat out a bit with colour and allow there to be some other colours in your paintings. I'm going in and adding some of these blues into these yellow ones. It's quite nice having that extra bluing because it gives you a little bit more depth. There's something really rather beautiful about it. I'm sticking with that. I like that. I'm going to pay a bit of attention to the stalk. And for me, yes, there's a sort of grey brown in there. So I'm going to put a mixture of grey and brown together. If you see a dog snout come into the picture, that's because my dog's trying to join in. So I can get some quality of, sort of slightly gnarled quality to it. I'm going to go in there like that, slightly gnarled quality. And then up there like that. So I'm just using that burnt umber and grey because, of course, as we've been painting, this has changed, and I can see some brown and grey now, which is quite handy because it's round here and it's round here. So we're adapting as we're painting. We're adapting to the, it's a bit like being on plein air. You have to adapt to your surroundings. And when you're painting something like a fruit, you have to adapt to time, to the aging process of the, or decaying process of the fruit. That's a very good exercise, really. Okay, right, so I think I might just do a little bit more over here, and then I think I'm going to call it a day on the painting and then go back to go to colouring pencils. Right, okay, so over here I've now realised there's a little bit more must have seeped through. So by building up slowly, you can give yourself enough of a backdrop for drawing on top. If you don't give yourself enough backdrop, what happens is your painting starts to look flat. And we don't want that. We want the depth. Depth, depth, depth. Right, now I want to go back in before I go onto the colouring pencils and put in some of these sort of like almost like little streaks at the top. And I'm using red because the juice is quite fresh at the top there. So I'm going to use red and alizarin crimson. So I can get some of those sort of, they almost look like fringes coming down on those, where it's seeping down. And I can do some of those with colouring pencils anyway, but it's nice to get some of those in like that. And that one's really down like that. Like that. See a tinge of pink on the stalk. And then the around the skin here, it's really started to seep in. So I'm doing a much thinner layer around the edge that I can blend and manipulate around that using that same colour I just had for the fringes of the pomegranates. I can just, I think we'll let that dry and then we will go into it with colouring pencils. Well done, everyone. Generally speaking, when you use colouring pencils, the colours you choose are based on the colours you've already painted with, pretty much. Although you may need to add in a much darker grey, almost black, or a much darker pink. So you may need some more extreme darker colours, but generally speaking, use the same palette that you've used for painting. When it's fully dry, you can go back in and enhance certain areas that maybe couldn't be enhanced so easily with paint. So I'm going to go back in because I've got a nice sharp pencil. I can actually start to really emphasize and give a more of a sense of 3D to some of these seeds. And I can get those little fringes in as well if I want. But sometimes it's just so nice to be able to go back in with a more precise, precision instrument, drawing instrument, and just enhance things that you've been working on. I can also add in bits of yellow if I want. So now I can go in and add in some of those sort of little filigree bits that may need adding in. And it makes it a little bit easier with the colouring pencil. There's some sort of lilac-y bits that I've noticed as well, which are around here. So all in all, it's a really nice way to finish off a picture, just to get some extra depth, some extra sort of sharpness that you might need that you can't get. Well, you can get it with a brush, but it's just makes your life a bit easier to do it this way. You might get some orange in there, orangey bits, orangey yellow. This is a very warm cadmium yellow. Nice for going back in on these. And just generally moving around and finding places that need sharpening up. Now, also, you can use a graphite pencil, a very sharp one. Now, not too much, and the lines should not be continuous. They should be broken. Try and do broken, almost like stitches, just to give you a little bit extra zing. Zing, zing, zing. And it just gives you that bite into it, that sort of sharp bite that you might want. You can also do something which I quite like doing, which is quite useful, where you use a softer pencil like a 4B and you lay down some graphite, transfer it onto your finger, and you can use that to add subtle shading into areas rather than doing it with the side of the pencil. Okay, so check that you've got things right by keeping on looking at your pomegranate. Now, if you're going to come back to your picture later, you can always put your pomegranate in the fridge, so it sort of halts the decaying process, and it means you can sort of have it from where you left off to continue your drawing. Now, I'm not turning this into a drawing because it's not a drawing, it's a painting, but it is very enjoyable to go back in with colouring pencils and get some of that sharpness back, as I was saying. Okay, so nearly there, nearly there. Not quite, but nearly. Get some more of the yellow. Now this is a pastel pencil. I haven't mentioned that, but pastel pencils are actually really nice with watercolour. They have a really good, well, they sort of just work beautifully with watercolour. They're just sort of like the perfect partner in a way, and really nice to work with as well. And you can just use subtle amounts in your picture. So this pastel, this yellow is a pastel pencil. And if you get really desperate, you can always add some white pastel pencil. I'm not quite at that stage, so I'm not going to add white, but I am going to go in with some reds because I feel like this needs a little bit more red. I'm just zinging it up a bit with the reds. Some bits I might have slightly missed off, like that. You can get that nice sort of slightly glazy, glossy effect on some of those seeds. The thing is with painting something like a pomegranate is where do you stop? It's just totally addictive, and one could go on for hours really, and it's knowing where to stop. I think it's when you're happy to leave it and go for a cup of tea, it's sort of indicating you're nearly there, or there actually, because you don't want to go over and over it too much. You really don't. I'm not going to get too finicky. But you can see where the colouring pencils really sort of zinged it up a little bit. Now, artistic license. Sometimes if a picture doesn't feel like it's coming together, what you can do is you can put colours around it that aren't necessarily there just to tie it all together. So if you've got a big expanse of that sort of yellowy whitey grey colour of the flesh out here, you can always put in a little hint of the red or the pink, and that will tie the vision of it all together a little bit better. Okay, that's that. That's that. And it will make your eye move around a bit better. So I don't know if you agree, I hope you do, that that's actually coming together rather nicely. Put a little bit of pink down there, artistic license. Yeah, that's coming together really nicely. There's a few little bits more I might want to do. I might get myself a purple pencil because I think there's some really nice depthy bits around there. Now, do I have a purple pencil? I did have, but I can't see it right now. In that case, I may even push the boat out a little bit further and use a purple felt tip pen. These are called watercolour brush pens. And I think I'm going to be really a little bit daring and go in very gently in here. Very, very gently. Showing you all the tricks now, aren't I? But that's what you're paying for. So there they are. Tiny, 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 tiny. Very, very little. Hardly anything, otherwise you'll over egg the pudding. And you don't want to do that. But all this does is it sort of gives you a bit of a zing, extra zing. Saying the word zing a lot, but you know what I mean. There's extra sort of oomph to the picture. Okay. But don't, as I say, don't overuse it because it can take the balance off and make it too overworked. Yeah, so I think that's looking rather lovely, actually, and I do say so myself. And I might get some pink, go in for some pinky bits. Like that. We're nearly there, actually. Nearly there. Nearly there. Not bad, not bad. I can see a little bit, it looks a bit unresolved down here. Pink's quite good, actually. Quite a good one to have added in. Nice. I think that's nice. That's very nice. Go back in with a pencil on some of the less resolved ones and just add in a sharpness down there, a bit of sharpness in here. It really does remind me of teeth at various stages of decay. Not bad. Not bad. Yep, not bad. I like that. Add a bit of filigree or and then I noticed there's a bit of down there. I think that will do. Painted with pomegranate juice. I think that will do. And other colours too. So we used alizarin crimson, we used cadmium yellow, we used yellow ochre, we used burnt umber, burnt sienna, grey, violet, cerulean blue, and we used cadmium red as well. Lots of colours, but really well worth it and a very enjoyable exercise.